Hello again, guys. So I've been wanting to do a video here for a while about my automotive history and how I ended up with a Mazda 3. And I'm recording this video with a new microphone I got to test it out. Hopefully it'll eliminate all the wind noise that I've been dealing with. But I mean, right now I'm inside my car, so should be fine. No wind noise in here. So yeah, let's start out. When I was in high school, I was a sophomore, got my driver's license. My family had a Plymouth Grand Voyager that they bought brand new in, I believe, 1988, so I grew up with that vehicle. My parents strapped me into that when I was an infant, and then I kind of inherited that because I was the youngest, so that was my car through high school, and probably looked ridiculous to everybody except me, but I had, no exaggeration, over 100 bumper stickers and about 8 of those window flags on it. So, you know, that was crazy. Somehow won best car, my graduating class, which, you know, it's like a pug. It's so ugly, it's cute. And somebody else in my class had a Dodge Viper, and, you know, how could you not win with that? But I guess it's the whole built, not bought thing. And, ooh, sounds good. Not sure if the camera will pick that up. Anyways, that Grand Voyager started going on me, like burning oil, overheating, just under 100,000 miles. So traded that in. I think we got like a few $100 for it. I got a Pontiac Grand Am, which was like a really cool car for me at the time. I liked it. It was a 99, so it wasn't the really old model. It was blue. Didn't really do much modifying except for just like a short ram intake. I think it might have actually been a cold air intake, but it added some nice sound under the hood. Had that for a while. That car gave me tons of issues. It was overheating from, I think it had coolant in the engine oil, so that's never good. When I bought it, there was like water in the trunk, and the salesman told me that it was from like a high pressure power wash, which was a joke. I mean, at the time I was just like, oh, okay. But somewhere underneath in the wheel well, every time it would rain, the water would splash up and get in there. And then in the winter time, I'd have like a 3-inch thick block of ice where my spare tire would have been. And then the air intake manifold went bad on that. It was like rattling. I had to get that replaced, which was like $1,000. But the engine overheating issue became so much that I had to get rid of it like immediately. I was putting a gallon of coolant in it almost every day. I would have like 5 gallons in my back seat just ready to go. Could not live my life like that much longer, financially or mentally. And then I finally got rid of that. I bought a 2002 Toyota Celica, which I loved. It was the GT. It had fairly low miles. It was the automatic transmission. And yeah, that did me well for a while. Had that for probably 2 or 3 years, and midway through I added a turbo kit to it. I didn't, but I bought one, and it was like turbokits.com. They added that. That made the car obviously less reliable, and it was starting to burn engine oil and just be unreliable. It would stall on occasion. So I had to take that to like an import shop, have the engine rebuilt, which was extremely expensive. This car, the Toyota Celica, was probably the most financial burdened car that I've had, where I've spent way more money than I should have on it. So I rebuilt that. After like 6 months to a year, it started doing the same thing, so I'm like, all right, I gotta get rid of this car. But in the meantime, while it was giving me some issues, I looked for the cheapest new vehicle you could find out there, and I found a 2011 Hyundai Accent with a manual transmission and no radio, crank windows, no air conditioning, and it was literally $9,800 brand new. So my payment was like $200. But get this, I did not know how to drive a manual transmission at the time, so I was watching YouTube videos, and on my test drive, the salesman pretended like he knew how to drive one, I guess, too. So we're out on our test drive, about a mile from the dealership. We were somehow able to get a mile away, but neither one of us could figure out really how to get it to drive back to the dealership. So we're struggling to get it back. Eventually got it back, And I decided I wanted that car, so I had somebody from the dealership deliver it to my apartment, and then I pretty much taught myself like at night when it was when there was no traffic out there, and I could just practice in like empty parking lots. So that is how I learned manual transmission, because I really wanted to learn, but nobody in my family ever knew, or I should say, nobody in my family ever owned a manual transmission. You know, in my lifetime. I think, you know, one of my parents drove them when they were younger, but, so yeah, I got a Hyundai Accent, so I had 2 vehicles at that time, and I was trying to get rid of my Celica because it was just too much, so I was at a Toyota dealership just kind of browsing vehicles, and I came across this 1989 Toyota Supra Turbo in immaculate condition with low miles, so I test drove that, and then I ended up buying that. So I got rid of my Celica, I traded that in, and I had the Supra for about 3 months, and it had the 7M GTE motor in it, which was like a pretty nice motor. It wasn't quite the motor of the 2JZ, obviously, but it was good. And after about, I think it was 3 months, I was kind of overwhelmed with 2 car payments, 2 insurance rates, so I was essentially sold the car back to the dealership, and they were probably like, what the heck is this guy doing, buying it back? So they wrote me a check back for quite a bit less than I bought it for, because they said my Celica exploded on a test drive, which I never, you know, I'll never know if that was truth or not, but yeah, so I I had the Accent at that point, so I daily drove that for quite a while, a couple years. I think I put about 30,000 miles on that car. That's when the Velosters were coming out, and the Veloster, I really liked it. I liked the way it looked, and gas mileage, all that. So I was at an auto show, and I saw that they were going to have a turbo model, so the Veloster Turbo was coming out. I basically put in an order, so when it was like brand new off the boat, like they called me, because I wanted the Marathon Blue with a manual transmission. Did not get the, I forget what the package was called, like the Ultimate, so I didn't have the sunroof and the navigation, but yeah, that car was awesome. I let the 450 watt sound system really intrigue me, kind of reeled me in, and yeah, this is the first vehicle that I spent a lot of time modifying and spending lots of money, other than like adding a turbo kit to my Celica, but I did like the catless downpipe, the exhaust, intake, tune, motor mounts, like everything that I really could to add performance. And I went through a couple different tuners. Initially, I had a canned tune that I had to send back a few times just because it wasn't running properly. It was backfiring, idle issues. So I ended up switching tuners to somebody totally different, and the car ran much better. It felt safer, but I think I had done some kind of damage when I had my first tune, and it was starting to make this rattling noise. So my Veloster Turbo with around 30,000 miles was giving me some issues, and yeah, so at that time I was getting like a job promotion where I was going to be moving to Tennessee, so I'm back and forth moving my stuff with this Veloster Turbo, and it's like starting to make more and more noises. I took it to a dealership, and they're like, oh, well, you did an intake and an exhaust, so we can't even really look at your car because it's so modified. I'm like, wow, really? Okay. And I was like, not even like, I never once said like I expect them to pay for it. I was just like, can you help me out, figure what this is so I can address the issue before the engine explodes. So yeah, that was, I also got into like automotive forums at the time, so I met my good friend Nazar on there, who I'm still friends with. He had a Veloster Turbo. We met up, so we would like do modifications and stuff and hang out. He still has his. He had a lot of issues with his turbo blew and some other issues, but yeah, he's still riding his. They honored his warranty throughout the whole process, so I think my dealership was just terrible, or whatever. I mean, more stingent. So anyways, yeah, so I had that car. I was in the forums, and people were saying their engines were exploding, and I'm just like paranoid. I got this new job. My car is going to explode. So that's when I saw it was a Mazda CX-5. Was driving down the street, and I was just like, wow, that's a really nice looking car. Not into SUVs or anything, but I'm just like the brand styling, and I was like, that's a cool car. So there wasn't one too far from where I lived in Tennessee, so I just kind of went to check them out, and totally looking to get, maybe, I knew of the Mazda Speed 3, so I was like, oh, maybe get a Mazda Speed 3. So I went there, I checked it out, and they told me that the Mazda Speed 3s were kind of on hold, not coming out. They still had some of the, I think, 2013s. So I just thought, in the meantime, I really liked the regular Mazda 3. It was my first experience with a Mazda and a Mazda 3. I test drove it. It felt really good. I mean, I was comparing it to my Veloster Turbo, and with the 2.5 engine, it felt just as fast, if not faster, and it was like smooth power band. It felt like the power came on earlier, which is kind of weird, but so I bought that in the Grand Touring, every single box checked, so it was like over 30 grand for that. So I wanted a nice reliable car. That dealership did unlimited miles of warranty, so it was like, as long as you own the car, you'd have it. That kind of reels you in, especially with Hyundai, because they have their 10-year 100,000. Anyways, so I had that for a while. About 30,000 miles I had on that Mazda 3 when I was moving again to Kentucky. So I moved initially from Ohio to Tennessee, and then from Tennessee back to Kentucky. And I used my Mazda 3 to move everything, and then a lot of times when I'm in like a new area, new situation, I treat myself to something new. So I was like at the dealership getting an oil change one day, and I saw the new MX-5s that just came out, and I'm like, oh man, can I test drive one of those? So I went for a test drive, and I let them have me take it out by myself because I did research, and I was like, well, the weight savings from the NC to the ND is essentially the weight of a second passenger in the car. So that's what I used to get them to let me drive it around. So I test drove it around. It was awesome. I mean, for having 155 horsepower or whatever, it felt very fast. Nimble, obviously. Everyone who's driven an MX-5 Miata knows that they just are so fun to drive. And prior to this vehicle, I would honestly say that my Accent was the most fun car that I had to drive because of the manual transmission and because you could launch it. You didn't have any like wheel spin, and you could just wide open throttle through like 3 or 4 gears without having to worry about it. In my Veloster, first gear was so short, it was hard, it was like always like a struggle to shift it, and it was wheel hopping, like bouncing wheels, which just totally took away. You had to like ease into it. And anyways, yeah, so the MX-5, you could just floor it. I got the club model, so it was Soul Red with the club model package, which gave like the front splitter and the or the front lip, and then like the rear trunk lid, little lip, and then it had like an LSD and like the Bilstein shocks, so it handled a little bit better than the just the sport model. I bought that in December, which is odd that I would buy that like right before like the worst winter days. So while I had that, you would obviously get snowstorms in the winter. I could not drive it, but I have a mountain bike that I was riding to work, so I didn't have to worry about like not having a way to get to work. So after 6 months with that, I was just wanting to do more mountain biking, going to trails and taking things with me, and I was just really missing having a Mazda 3 type vehicle where you could just throw something in the hatch and take it where you wanted to go without having to get creative. As you can see in some of my videos, I had like the Seasucker bike mount and mounting it like along the passenger with the roof down. So that was just too much, and I talked myself into just going back to a Mazda 3. But this time I got the sport model Mazda 3 because I was just like, if I'm going to end up with a Mazda 3 that costs the same as my MX-5, I'm going to end up just saying like, why didn't I just keep the MX-5 and you know, get a rental car here and there. So I was just like, I'm going to save some money, make this more worth it to get rid of the MX-5. So I had to roll over a little bit of money. Obviously, I only had a brand new car for 6 months. So I think it only ended up being like around $1,000, which is kind of a lot, but factored in, I saved over $100 per month, actually $150 per month on my monthly payment. And so now I'm back in my sport model Mazda 3, and that's how I picked up on the Mazda brand, and that's how I am where I am right now. I've gone through a lot of cars for somebody who's 30 years old. The time frame that I had each car was going down each time I owned a vehicle. So, I mean, if you're a car enthusiast, you know that you're always out there looking at the new stuff that's coming out and wanting something that has better performance, better gas mileage, whatever reason. And it just makes it so difficult to keep a car that you have sometimes. And I think there's those people out there that buy a car to have it for 10 years, and then there's people out there who just like to have the newest and just keep things fresh. But I said this for vehicles in the past, but I think this time I probably will keep this car for a long time. I had my Veloster for 20 months, my first Mazda 3 for 17 months, and then my MX-5 for 6 months. And it's the end of April now, so I've had this car for 10 months already, and I'm definitely content with it. I've done a couple light modifications, and I don't plan to do too much more. I'm not going the tuning route, because from before with my Veloster, it kind of ended up ruining the car. And I know there's safe tunes you can have, but I just don't feel like going down that route. Lowering the car, I think it looks great, but it's just not my thing. I've never lowered any vehicle that I've had. Just not interested in something like that, so I'll leave that up to the other people. I just like leaving it stock height, and I'm never one that looks at a car and I'm like, whoa, look at the wheel gap. I just think it looks normal to me. And when I see lowered cars, I'm just like, man, how does that guy live with that car on a daily basis? Because I scrape enough stuff at stock height. Alright, so that's my story, and hope you enjoyed, and hope this wasn't too long. The first time I recorded it, it was way too long, so I had to speed things up, so if it seemed like I was rushing through it, that's why. But I passed 100 subscribers, so I wanted to make a video here so you could get to know my background a little bit more, and that I didn't sometimes you see people in these like certain cars and you wonder what their past was like. So I've dealt with all that crap of overheating and having the junkers that you know, I had to, that Grand Am that I had, I'd be on my way to work almost daily having to pull over and stop for 15 to 20 minutes. The key in that car, I remember, like, wasn't recognized a bunch of times, so the security feature would kick in and wouldn't let you start it for 15 minutes. And in the middle of winter time with my grandmother one time, we're sitting there at a gas station for 15 minutes in 10 degrees waiting for it to start. We're just in there shivering. So, you know, I had gone through that type of crap too. So I like having a new vehicle, something reliable. It's usually my number one thing when I go to look at a car is reliability and the way it looks, and then power is really one of the lower things on my radar. So, all right, thanks guys. See you next time. Feels nice to have a garage spot again. Want to hear something funny? Funny for you, but not funny for me. When I was closing this garage, there's no handle here, so I stupidly grabbed it by this. And you can see I came down and it just crunched my finger. And look at the dent that it left. Yeah, that was pretty painful.